Hello again. This time I would love to share with you a little bit about why we chose the name As Things Fall Apart for our 18-month-long fellowship program, this pay what you can afford adventure in composting modernity into Earth-centric and led relational cultures. And you know, this title, As Things Fall Apart, it's very particular. And you know, I really had to feel in. It came through, and it felt really like this is what we're up to. This is what it is that we're offering, is a container to support this, you know, journey around composting modernity. As things are falling apart, as we look around us and within us, it's like things are falling apart in the world in a way that hasn't been the case as far as I'm concerned, at such a generalized extent, to such a generalized extent, up until fairly recently. Needless to say, there's been a lot of falling apart happening in, for example, the global south for a very long time. But just looking at a kind of more generalized global context, it feels like we are in a time in human history when things are falling apart, and that falling apart is very much a crumbling of modernity and everything that modernity is kind of made up of, you know, whether that's patriarchy or capitalism, heteronormativity. There are so many kind of normative forces at place that ultimately are centered around what we might call a paradigm of power over, you know, of controlling, of centralizing power, and attempting to centralize that power within particular humans, particular roles, particular institutions, and within that power over paradigm that sits at the kind of as the underbelly of modernity, there's a what might we call it? There's a denial and a fear, probably unconscious most of the time, if not all of the time, of true power, which from our perspective is more than human. It includes the other than humans. It includes the plants and the trees, the four-leggeds, the two-leggeds, the winged ones, the creepy crawlies, the ones that slither along on their bellies. And it also includes the more than human realms, the invisible realms, our ancestors, the angelic realms, the underworld, and so much more. And it's these invisible forces and our other than human friends and the power that resides in the kind of interplay between all of us in this kind of multitudinal existence, moment to moment, that is true power. And that this true power is not something that any one person or being can own or even reclaim. For us, it's much more about, and what this 18-month journey is all about, is learning how to build the muscles that enable us to become empty vessels for this power, this more than human power, to move through us, this energy, this life force, which some people call mystery, some people call God, some people call Eros. There are many names for it. And yeah, so composting modernity, through our experience and our, I guess, cosmology, you might want to call it, is all about making ourselves available as a vessel for this more than human power to move through us, so that power can be shared and distributed and made visible, and so much more than our individual human selves, and really liberated from this kind of centralizing force where it's causing so much harm and destruction, and that really is what sits at the heart of modernity, it would seem. And so what's this got to do with As Things Fall Apart as an utterance of words? Well, for us, the way that change happens, we experience, at least, and we have a hunch is a truth, is through supporting emergence of what is. And so if we're in denial of the fact that, things are falling apart, and if we're really just defaulting to this kind of way of seeing things, which again is very laced into modernity, of trying to always see things as positive, trying to always quickly fix things, to sort of skip over what is, so that we can get to what the strategic mind thinks it should be. And this is what we're seeing all the time, whether it's in kind of the classic vehicles of modernity or even within our change-making groups and movements. Often there's a kind of skipping to fixing rather than kind of supporting the emergence of what's actually happening. And that, of course, to our beloved protective parts and the strategic mind can feel really frightening, to be like, what? We're supposed to actually support things to fall apart. But it's like, unless we are actually willing to build our muscles of tender courage, to be willing to actually get behind the falling apart of modernity, then it's impossible for us to actually be creating space or supporting space to be created for something new to happen, something completely unfathomable to our strategic minds and so much more powerful than our individual and collective, even human selves. And so as things fall apart is really a naming of what's happening, because we believe that that's how change happens, is to really get behind and support what's actually happening, so that what's wanting to happen can actually come through in a way that's kind of a representation of the truth of something much bigger than what our kind of blessed strategic minds think should be happening right now. And all of this is to say that doesn't mean that the only thing that's happening is a falling apart. Within that, it's like there's so much energy that's released. There's so much unexpected aliveness and fieriness and, and depth and connection through grief moving through, and just a reconnection with what our particular powers and gifts in this lifetime are. There's so many rich pickings to be had when we do start to build these muscles, composting muscles, and when we do start to learn to remember how to become vessels for this more than human power. So there's something of a dance between being able to be a vessel for the grief that wants to come through when things are falling apart and what is lost in that, but also the aliveness that is possible when we let go of rigidly holding on to this kind of idea of how things need to be. So this is a little bit about why we've chosen the name As Things Fall Apart. We're just trusting that way of relating, and particularly around emergent strategizing and making ourselves available as vessels for a more than human power to emerge through us. In service of all beings, in service of life's co-evolutionary edge. We're just trusting that those of you who resonate with that will kind of hear the chime and come and explore joining us.